inspired by Bill's speech, and you know, he's coming at the business from a certain perspective. I'm going to come at it from another perspective, which is really from the ground up, and tell you my story about how we formed a company in 2009 with 6 people, and have achieved consistent growth, and I'll talk to you about some of the things that we encountered and challenges, and basically an attitude that it took, I think, to create what we have now. And we're still in the middle of it. But let me share my story with you guys. So first, who I am, I'm a mechanical engineer, graduate of the University of Florida, bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering. I graduated in 1988, and I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state. And so my background originally, or my career started in research and development, testing. I worked for government contractors in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in Arkansas, Little Rock. I was there when Bill Clinton was governor. And so I learned a lot about other states and other cultures because I was originally from Florida. And after working in R&D for a while, a professor called me and said, you know, I've got this new thing that I'm doing. It's expert witness consulting, which a lot of professors do. And would you like to come back to Gainesville and join me in this endeavor? And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, accident reconstruction. And I had no idea what that was at the time. But that started me in '92 on this career path that I've followed on and off ever since. So the kind of work that I do and that my company does is we provide forensic engineering consulting services. Our clients are attorneys and adjusters, risk managers. We respond at this point in our career of our company to major catastrophic events, building collapses, bridge collapses, trucking accidents. Of course, Florida is a great place to be for this kind of work. If you read the newspaper or watch the news, you could see that as part of our state's economy, as part of our state's growth, that there is a lot of activity, which is triggering, as a consequence, accidents of various types. So as engineers and scientists, our job is to figure out what happened in an event, to provide that information to the parties to help them make decisions regarding dispute resolution. You know, I started this work when I was relatively young, and what happens is the kinds of people who hire experts like people with gray hair, because it's pretty hard to be an expert if you're just getting started in your professional career. And I was relatively young, and I realized in the early '90s in Gainesville I was still relatively young. So I went back into industry. I went to work for some R&D companies. I did product development work, was part of some teams that developed patents, developed a few on my own. Part of that journey helped me to be a better forensic engineer and failure analyst, because I went through the whole design process. And then I took a break and taught for 3 years in Mississippi, so I was a professor for 3 years, full-time professor. That helped me to develop my teaching skills, and there's professors in the group here, I'm sure, but you know, an engineer is very often not somebody who's comfortable getting up in front of a group and speaking, so I was able to hone that skill set. And then finally in 2000, I decided that teaching is one good way to go broke. So I aspired to do more, and I went online, I think it was AOL at the time, and typed in accident reconstruction jobs, and that's how I ended up back here in Orlando. And I went to work for a fairly large company, and that took me to this current path. And what happened was I was brought in to start a practice, this forensic engineering practice, within the umbrella of a civil engineering firm. And that becomes important in 2008 and 2009. So I was hired as an engineer. I learned from them and developed some skills so that I eventually was able to become a manager. I became a shareholder. I started out as one guy just trying to survive at age 38, starting in a new job. And then after about 5 years of doing the same thing over and over again, building relationships with clients, developing my technical skills, becoming better at my craft, I said, you know, this is kind of fun, but I'd like to try something different. So why don't we try to grow this practice? And I was in a company that encouraged practice builders, so they allowed me to hire somebody. We used a recruiter and hired somebody, and we hired somebody else. So the message there was for 5 years I did the same thing until I was comfortable enough to, with the proper backing, to go out and recruit and hire. So 4 years later, we had grown that practice under my guidance from me to 12 people in 2 offices. And of course, our revenue stream went up by a factor of 7. And then the recession hit, and the civil engineering firm I worked for cut 1/3 of their staff nationwide. And they came to me, and my practice was booming because one thing about accident reconstruction and forensic engineering, we're recession proof. In fact, there's an argument to be made that when we go into recession, our business goes up, people become desperate, so they look to the legal system to ring the bell, if so to speak. So that is the environment we live in Florida, like it or not. And so our job, or our practice continued to grow. I'm an engineer, I can build a spreadsheet. I'm not an MBA, I have no business training, I have no business experience, but you know, I could look at a spreadsheet and I can do math. And I realized when they came to me and said, you need to cut one of your key people and you need to take a pay cut. And so I went home and my wife said, well, you've been talking about this for years, now's the time. And so we, in 2009, in January, started planning. And in July, really, you know, it's funny when you run a company, it was really a dispute over $10,000 with my employer. And that was, they'd say, what do you think your bonus should be? I told them what I thought it should be. They said, you're out of your mind. I had the data to support it. And I said, okay, I'll compromise. They said, no. I said, okay, see you later. So that's a little bit of a bold step, but think about what was going on in 2009. Real estate was being given away, so we could get a nice rent for a low price. And when I approached the company with the idea, they said, well, you're the lead of this team. If you leave, we're going to lay off your team. So I said, darn. Because every one of them had told me, if you leave, we want you to take me with you. So I took on 5 very trained, skilled engineers and scientists and a secretary. And so we started as a group of 6 with no other agenda but to just own our jobs. Okay, we can do fine, and we did do fine again for 2 or 3 years. And so that occurred from 2009 to about 2014, 15. So about 5 years, again, just doing the same thing day in, day out. You know, we were experiencing 15, 20% growth, steady. But when you're 6 people and you have 20% growth, you have to hire 1 person. So it's not a big deal. And we did that. And then 2015, again, I got a little bored with that. And I said, you know, this is working really well. Let's try something different. Let's go out and hire people. Because by then, we had good relationships with clients. And we started hiring. The more people we hired, the more business that came in, the more revenue we had, the more profits we made. And it just fed on itself. So my son Mitch is here, and he was at UCF studying human factors, which is a scientific discipline that sometimes get used in our field. And he was an undergraduate student, and he had about 5 more years to get his PhD and 5 years of work before he'd be useful as a consultant with enough experience. And I said to him, you know, I don't need a scientist in 10 years. I need somebody to help me run this company. Because by then we were, I think, about 14 people then, maybe 12. So Mitch went to Rollins, got an MBA, came out a changed man. It's a very good program, by the way. And came out a completely different person and joined us in 2016 in the summer. At that point in time, we were, again, like 15 people, I think $3.5 million a year in revenue. And since then, we've doubled our size. We're 31 now, and we have 2 offices, and we just moved into a new space over by UCF. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today is we could not have done that if I had continued to try to run this myself. I was a great visionary. I was enough of an integrator to get the job done to a point, but eventually we had hit that wall they talk about in a lot of the books, and we had to make some changes, and those changes were to figure out what I was good at and what I needed help with. What motivated that is, so I'm way off script already. What motivated that was I went to the CEO Nexus group. And I walked into that group, and it was the first orientation, basically looking for new business owners to join a group. And I realized how much I didn't know. And that was very humbling. And they were throwing around terms that an engineer never, like EBITDA. What the heck is that? We bill, we do work, we send our bills, we get paid, it goes in a checking account, I look at it, we got money, good, everything looks great. And that's sort of the way we ran the company for a long time. Yeah. And so then we hire an MBA, and he talks about cash flow and monthly projections and profitability analysis, and I mean, things I'm still barely keeping up with because I don't need to, because he takes care of that. I just look and see when it's time to take a distribution, and everything's good. So I'm just going to, with that introduction, sort of walk through some things. And as I was thinking about how to speak today, I was thinking of all the things people had said to me over the years, 30 years as a career as an engineer. And I just brainstormed and wrote a bunch of them down. So when I first left the civil engineering firm and I was deciding how to build this practice, and we're always concerned about security. I had kids in college and kids in high school, and the people who came with me had children in school, and there's a lot of responsibility when you all of a sudden go from collecting a paycheck from an employer to being responsible for generating the work to cover 6 families. And that's a lot of responsibility. We're very nervous about it when we started this company. But this gave me hope. One of our key clients, a partner at a major law firm, said, Don, you're going to be very successful because you have the most important thing you need to start a business. You have clients. And that's arguably, maybe not the most important thing. It was the most important thing for me, because if you don't have clients as a consultant, then you're not generating revenue. So having clients, and then another comment from another attorney was, congratulations, what took you so long? You lasted on that large bureaucratic behemoth which put so many handcuffs and rules and restrictions in how you could run your practice for 9 years, and now you're out, you're free, you're nimble. And being small and new and nimble, you're hungry, first of all, because your financial future is on the line. And secondly, you can take risk, and you can adjust to changes, and you can adapt new technologies, and you can spend the money the way you think it needs to be spent without having to run it up a chain of command and wait 3 months for some approval structure. Those lessons from running a small company were very important in developing the philosophies of how we run our company now. Your reputation, of course, is critical as a consultant. It's the most important thing that you have. We're always trying to make sure that our reputation is strong. It only takes one mistake to ruin that reputation, and word gets around real fast. We operate in a small community. All of our clients know each other. All the service providers know each other, so a mistake will do a lot of damage very quickly, so quality control is critical. And then as an engineer and somebody who's trying to develop a business, this is a challenge for us as we're building our group, is to take scientists and engineers who aren't real extroverted and convince them that you have ownership in your practice and you have a responsibility to go out and generate work. And you have to think like a salesman. You have to look at what's your value proposition to the client, and to recognize that they're paying us very healthy rates, not for them to tell us what to do, but for us to tell them and give them advice. And through that, we have to start to think like salesmen. And this is a quote, the selling something was a quote that I heard from a college professor when we went to make a sales pitch up in Jackson, Mississippi. And I listened to him speak, and he was so eloquent and convincing that I wanted to buy something from him, even though I was on a sales team. And I said to him, Terry, how do you switch hats? He said, Don, remember, we're always all selling something. So I try to explain that to our group. I don't know if I'm always successful. Here's one I learned as a professor. If you really want to know a subject, teach it. You can sit in a classroom, you can listen to a lecture, you can listen, but if you really want to know something, teach that subject. Then you'll know it. I use dynamics a lot in my accident reconstruction work. Fortunately, I taught dynamics as a professor at Southern Miss. And even though I had had the class twice at the University of Florida as an undergraduate student and a graduate student, I really didn't comprehend the significance of the scientific discipline until I stood up for 16 weeks and taught it. When I started in '92 at the consulting firm in Gainesville, one of the partners in that firm, it was a very small group, said to me, you know, this is in '92, so the time context is important here. He said, there's always room for a Cadillac in every business. You know, be the Cadillac. Don't adopt a vendor mentality. Seek out those clients who recognize your value and then are willing to pay you a premium for it. That's worked out very well in our work. This is one another professor said, develop knowledge that people are willing to pay you for and then charge them for it. That's basically the essence of consulting. And one of the things that I learned when I was building my practice is that there's a lot of things I didn't know, even when I started the business. So the first thing, fortunately, that happened to me was I found a business advisor. And he happened to be my CPA. And he said, well, you've got a great idea, let's get a business plan. So he helped me to write a business plan. We went to a bank, we got a loan, which I just put in the checking account, never spent it, and I gave them their money back 6 months later, but at least we went through the process and I had the ability to have that. But he also said, well, you need advisors, you need an attorney, you need insurance brokers, you need somebody to put your health insurance package together, put your benefits package together, things that when you're 1 or 2 or 3 people or self-employed, you don't worry too much about. But if you're going to build an organization that's going to be attractive to people, for people to come to work for you, you have to have these benefits and this organizational structure. And I didn't know anything about any of those things. So it was very important, fortuitously for me, that we were able to put together a team of outside consultants. And guess what? I paid them for their service. And I was very grateful to do it. Every minute, every hour that a business owner like myself spends doing accounting work or legal work is revenue that I'm missing, because there's only so many hours in a day. And you have to, in my opinion, find where you add value and focus on that and take a portion of that revenue stream and hire people who are professionals in their fields. And that's worked out very well for me in developing our business. Another thing was I always wanted to, as part of this adage, to get ahead of our competition. So going back, you think about accident reconstruction and the way it's done. You go to a crash site, there's skid marks and furrows and scrapes, and you go to the junkyard and look at a wrecked car. Or you may go look at a building that's got some damage, and you take that physical evidence and you apply scientific principles and you try to determine what happened. You work backwards. So in the old days, you take a measuring wheel and you take a pencil and a pad and you'd measure things and draw them on your pad, and you go back and make a hand drawing and try to figure out what happened. Well, then our business adopted surveying equipment, total stations. This was in the 90s. You see them used on the sides of the road by engineers and surveyors. That was a big advancement for law enforcement and engineers at that time to bring engineering into the kind of work we were doing. So what happened in 2010 was this new technology was offered called 3D laser scanning. So you may have heard of that. Faro has a big office in Lake Mary. It's a European-based company. But 3D laser scanners would let anybody operating it digitally map the environment in a matter of minutes with millions of data points, all unique in XYZ coordinate space. So to bring it home, I could bring in a laser scanner and digitally map this entire room in about 20 minutes, take it back to the office, and now we have the foundation for animations and 3D renderings, and you can see a lot in architectural work. But that was a game changer in the field of traffic accident reconstruction. Why is that? There's a barrier to entry. Each one of those scanners costs $60,000. And you have to be a professional to run it and then make sense out of the data. So you have to not only be able to run the equipment, you have to hire somebody whose focus is going to be on running the equipment and doing something with the data. So it's a big investment in personnel. Given this fact, and I didn't say this earlier, when you look at the service providers in our line of work, there's one company that has about 600 employees nationwide. There's another company that may have 500, one that has 300, and then there's about 100 companies that have less than 20 employees. So it's a very small, it's a fragmented business, and it's one in which costs are a big factor. And the revenue stream's great as long as you have the work coming in because the hourly billing rates are high, but you have to have the ability to invest in that equipment. So as this change, this technology change that Bill was just talking about was occurring in our business, a lot of experts who were close to retirement said, you know what, I don't want to compete anymore. This is too expensive. I'm going to go ahead and retire early. And I had 3 individuals come up to me, give me a big hug and say, I can't compete with you right now. I'm going to retire. Good luck. And as a consequence of that and other things, we, with our group of 21 experts and 30 employees in Orlando, we are the largest traffic accident-based forensic firm in the state of Florida. And there is no other firm in Orlando that even does this kind of work except for 2 small companies. My former employer, who has two people doing it, and 1 sole practitioner. And I've had a lot of clients say, you know, I'd love to use somebody else because I don't like all my eggs in one basket, but you pushed everybody else out. And so, you know, part of that was because of technology, part of it was adhering to quality and hiring people. I'm going to talk about people here in just a minute. And one of the things, too, that helped, I think, develop the reputation is that I always put the best interests of my clients ahead of my own. And if somebody calls me up and wants to run something by me, I don't need to open a file or charge them. You know, tell me what's going on. Let me see if I can help you. If I think there's a way to help you, then we can do something. If not, if I'm not even the right person or our firm's not the right person, here's another firm that could do the job for you. There's options. And that's really helped me out a lot. So now I have a reputation, our firm has a reputation. If our clients don't know what to do, they call us first to figure out what they should do, and we'll give them some advice. And sometimes we get the job, most of the time, sometimes we don't. But they'll call again next time. Moving away from clients to people, obviously if you take care of your people, they'll take care of the mission. Most of our employees are engineers and scientists with advanced degrees. I don't have a PhD, but I have 6 PhDs that work for me. So it's the whole idea of surrounding yourself with people smarter than you has worked out really well. Now I know certain things that they may not know. I know the legal business a lot better than they do, and that's the value they see in coming to work for our firm. The last 5 people we hired came from San Francisco, Portland, Salt Lake City, and Seattle, and one local guy. So why would people uproot their families, leave those fine cities, travel across the country, leave good jobs? Every one of them had six-figure salary jobs, and come to work for a company with 25 employees in Orlando. Weather. Taxes, low tax rate. Well, I like to think that we found a few things that helps somebody who wants to be associated with a young, nimble, growing company where they can make a difference. And that is what we are, and that's how we advertise ourselves. But also, we're going to spend the time, and I'm going to spend the time to teach them things that they weren't getting at their last employer. Because learning the science and the engineering is one thing, understanding the insurance industry and the law as applied to what we do is totally something else. And guess what? You can't go to school to learn that. That can only be mentored. And so a lot of companies don't have people who are interested in mentoring the next generation or their peers. And I love teaching and I love working with people, so it's worked out really well. And that cultural identity has transcended from myself to the key folks we've hired who are now adopting that same philosophy and developing their staff. So obviously you guys are all aware of the importance of working with your team, and just like I like to place the interest of my clients ahead of my own, I look out for the welfare of my employees and staff ahead of my own as well. And it's working. And so I want to shift a little bit over to growth. I already mentioned the importance of having a team around you and how that helped me in developing our company is surrounding myself by advisors that I trust, and they have made a difference in our growth. And before I left the other firm to start this firm, we did a lot of preparation. And we also started small. I suppose everybody in here has seen the domino idea where you can take a domino this high, and then by tipping them against dominoes 1.5 times larger, you can knock over a 100-pound domino in 9 dominoes. And you can Google that or look it up on YouTube. But the idea of it is in business that you should start with what you know and start small. And this is what we did. And then eventually within the business of traffic accident reconstruction, and we had dominated the local market in Central Florida. We're a major force throughout the state of Florida. To look for other growth opportunities, I wanted to diversify that service offering and move into allied disciplines with the same client base, but engineers who do something different. So our recent hires were experts in biomechanics and human factors, structural engineering, and electrical engineering. And so the clients we serve are the same clients, but those are technical service offerings that I couldn't do and the group we had couldn't do. So it made sense in our growth strategy, and it's worked out really well over the last 4 years. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was an engineer, and I still am, and I went to the CEO group and they were throwing around terms I'd never heard about, that's when I had this epiphany that there was so much I didn't know. I could own my job, but could I run a company? Could I be a leader of a group of people? And that's been the focus of my personal development and growth over the last 4 or 5 years. And I recognize that I may be able to take this ship so far, I may not be able to take it where it could ultimately go. And so we're engaged in some decisions right now about what to do next. Because I know what I know, and I know there's a lot I don't know. So we're having a little bit of reflection going on in our firm about what's the next step for us. One of the observations that a lot of people made was, that was amazing, you left your firm and you were an overnight success. We were not an overnight success. So this is a quote online that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is by the time I started this company, I'd already started one other that failed. I had recognized from that lesson the importance of clients, because the first company didn't have clients, and that's why it didn't last very long. I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur and a business owner, but I didn't know anything about it. And so, and by the time I started Forensic Engineering Technologies in 2009, I had been an engineer already for 21 years. And I had done the kind of work that we did for 17 of those years. And I had worked for a company that only did that kind of work with a client base for 9 years. So it wasn't like we just started a company out of the blue. And we did start it in a recession, and that turned out to be a good choice for us because we were able to get significant discounts on leasing space and benefits, and everything was, in terms of cost, was low. In fact, we sublet a space in 2011 from a medical equipment supplier in Lake Mary. They're based in Texas. They built out this gorgeous Class A+ office space, fitted it with $150,000 worth of office furniture, beautiful wood, and never occupied it. So they wanted to put up for sublease, so we leased, I think it was $15 a square foot for that space. And they gave us the furniture. So that is some of the things you can do in a recession. So it worked out really well for us. Some of the things that I found, again, just a learned audience, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but slow growth has worked for us. 20% a year is what we strive for. I think we may try to grow a little bit faster than that now that we've got the systems in place and our new space, protocols and procedures. We're ready to maybe amp that up a little bit. The rate inhibitor to growing in our line of work is finding people. Because you don't go to college to major in forensic engineering. There's no such discipline offered. What a forensic engineer is somebody who has a strong engineering background who then is trained in investigation and failure analysis, the insurance and claims process, and the legal business. So you have to learn on the job. And so what our challenge is to recruit people who may have the soft skills and the technical hard skills, and then to teach them the subject matter related to the work we do. So our key initiative now is to expedite that training process. Typically, an engineer from the time, if they were hired, say with 5 years of engineering experience, but none in forensics, until you could trust them in front of a client, not to say something foolish, would be about 3 years. And then before they could stand on their own, where the client would trust them to take the lead on a job, is between 5 and 10 years. So that's a huge investment, and it's a huge time curve. And what we're trying to do now, and our competitors are as well, is try to make that expedite it and go faster. We're having some luck with that. The main skill, ironically, our guys and our people are technically super. It's the soft skills that they struggle with, And so one of the things we're toying with is having somebody who knows a subject stand up in front of the group and talk for an hour and be entertaining and deliver a message that resonates. Because when you get in front of a jury, and many of you have been on jury duty, I would imagine, when you're an expert witness and you have to explain technically sophisticated subject matter in a way that's going to make sense to them, resonate with them, and allow them to make an important decision, it's not always easy to do. So we're working on that. And this is out of Traction. I had never heard of Traction when I went to the first CEO Nexus meeting, but I've read it and we've adopted most of it. So I was a pretty good visionary. I like to come up with ideas and keep up with what's going on. I was an adequate integrator. And so what happened was I realized I was not a great integrator and I hated it. So Mitch is really good at that. And he can build spreadsheets that'll make your eyes bug out, and it's like really cool. And it's like, how much money do we have in the bank? That's all I really need to know. And what's our growth look like?
Highlight back in yellow.
Yeah.
Make that pink.
Yeah. Oh, he's got his color schemes. But our partnership is really working out well. But then what we did was we built on that, and then by growing, now we can allow our experts to become specialists. So somebody can focus on their discipline and become really good at it, become a national expert. We have a human factors expert who is on several national committees related to the development of autonomous vehicles, and he's highly regarded nationally in that field. We have other experts who are able to really focus on their discipline, but we've also now been able to hire more business people. We hired a colleague of Mitch's who is earning his MBA, 7 years at Lockheed, so he's used to production coordination. That was his job there. And so we have made investments in people who have no billing responsibilities. And their only jobs are related to administrative functions. And that's a big step for a small consulting firm where a person may wear two hats, and they're going to bill and they're going to run the company, to saying, well, you know what, I'm going to bill more, and I'm going to take the excess revenue I generate, I'm going to hire specialists who can focus on developing the company. And with that foundation now, we are poised to grow much, much faster than the 15 to 20% rate we've been growing at, which coincidentally has attracted some interesting outside interest in our firm. So we're looking at some interesting, this could be an interesting year for us in looking at opportunities maybe for some M&A activity. Either way, I'm not sure of the role yet. We're still learning about that. One of the things I learned about building a team was this mantra that I made up and seems to fit. Because in our line of work, the key impediment to growth is recruiting and retaining key technical personnel. So I've really focused on recruiting people. Then you have to train them, as I mentioned. And then you have to be confident enough in your relationship with those people to transition clients to them. And the idea is for them to build their own client relationships. And I'm really happy right now when a client calls our firm and they don't know who I am. That is a great milestone that we hit about 2 or 3 years ago. And so I'm very happy and I'm encouraged by the fact that our practice builders and our engineers are developing those relationships with key clients that are minus me. They don't have to have me involved. And if we're going to talk about any sort of growth activity or M&A activity, we have to find a way to cut me out a lot of these relationships. Otherwise, I'll never be able to retire, which I do think about more and more lately. And of course, then you have to keep your good people. So we do that through a combination of very generous compensation packages and very good benefits. And one of the things that I identified and that I think helps us to recruit people is that engineers and scientists love to build spreadsheets and do math. And I imagine business people do too. But our business is really simple. You do work, you bill for your time, you generate revenue, you send a bill out, and you get paid for it. So anybody can do the math. Your hourly rate times the number of hours you bill in a year is your annual revenue, okay? It's very transparent. So there's no sense for me to try to hide it. The trick is to create a compensation scheme that's transparent, that rewards those consultants for their extra effort. And so it has to be variable. So what I did and what I developed is what I consider to be a generous base salary. I guess they might argue with me, but I think it's pretty good. Good benefits. But then upon hitting some minimum production goals, the bonus trick comes in, and it's measured to the 100th%. So like it's all spreadsheets. So if you bill and we collect this much revenue, your bonus is going to be directly tied to your revenue stream, and you're going to get paid it after we get paid. So you're not going to be paid in advance because we don't want to borrow money to pay bonuses. It's amazing what a motivator that is. If somebody says, I want to make more money, you can make more money in one of 3 ways. Develop your skills to the point where you can justify raising your hourly rate, in which case your base salary will go up. Actually, 2 ways. Well, there are 3 ways, sorry. There's 3 ways. The other is bill more hours, and then your percentage of your base, which is paid as bonus, will go up in a very measurable and predictable way. And then there was another bonus scheme that I created to reward those people who are building teams. Because you don't want to create this idea in our consulting world where people are going to hoard work and build it all themselves and not delegate it to others. So what I did was I created a bonus system which allows for people who build a practice and build client relationships and generate more revenue by assigning work to others to participate in another project manager bonus. And that excites people, particularly when they're coming in, because everybody sees, look, if you can build a company from 1 person to 30, I can build a practice from 1 person to 4 or 5. And that extra 4 or 5 people will put, another $100,000 a year in their pocket. So that kind of scheme appeals to entrepreneurial type people, which is who I prefer to hire. Ownership thinking. So, most of you have read that book, and the idea is we try to create that ownership thinking in our staff. Think of that and let them think of themselves as practice builders, but operating under an umbrella of an organization that's going to take care of keeping the lights on, giving them a place to work, investing in equipment, providing technical support so they can focus on building relationships with clients. This concept of lead from the front and lead from behind. So historically, I was the first one at the office, I was the last one to leave, and I always work on the weekend. Eventually that gets old. So what I try to encourage everybody is, by leading by example, is you've got to put in the effort to get ahead in life, particularly if you're going to have an ownership mentality. But if we're going to keep growing and if people are going to stand on their own, we have to be able or willing to delegate. And that requires a lot of trust. So this idea of leading from behind is, here are the tools you need, here are the skills you need, here's the phone numbers of the clients, here's the technical abilities, here's your staff, I'm going to get out of your way. And I've been doing that a lot more lately, and that's actually accelerating our growth and the development of our folks. And I don't get that call at 4 in the morning because there's been a major truck accident on I-75 in Ocala. It goes to somebody else now, which I'm very happy about. In terms of decision making, I'm still learning a lot about this, but our tagline for our company is see the facts from every angle. When you have a contested matter and you have a technically confusing situation when you're trying to figure out what happened and piece together the puzzle, you have to look at it from all around. And many of you may not know this, but Florida is a comparative fault state. And what that means legally is that a case can go to a jury, and a jury can apportion liability using any percentage of weighting they want to. Many states are a modified fault state in which, unless the plaintiff proves that the defendant was more than 50% liable for their incident, the plaintiff collects nothing. In Florida, if the plaintiff gets awarded 5%, they collect their 5%. 10%, 20, 30, whatever the number is. In many of these cases, there's multiple parties. So we're not in it very often because somebody's trying to win or lose. They're contesting the case and going forward to a jury trial because they're arguing over 10 or 20%. And in order to make those comparative fault arguments, you have to step back and take a big holistic approach to the problem, because almost every accident, no matter what type, results from more than one mistake, more than one error. And whether it's a traffic accident or a premises accident or a product failure, there are a series of factors that come together to cause that event, and it's our job to figure out all those factors that came together to cause a certain event. Adjust to changing conditions. We heard that from Bill earlier. Sometimes you don't have to decide, or you can delay a decision. So, if you choose not to make a decision at that time, you still made a choice, and that's perfectly all right. That's actually a line from a Rush song. I guess that resonated with me in 1983 or so. And then be intentional with the decisions. And once you make your mind up, do something. My wife does this a lot. She'll buy a present for somebody and then put it in the closet and not give it to them. I mean, she got halfway there. So I think the idea of it is if you're going to make a decision, execute and act on it. Even if it's wrong, you can change your mind along the way as long as you haven't overly committed. Almost done here. So one of the things I found too is as our group grew from 6 people to 30 people, that I had to be careful what I said to everybody else. And it's amazing, and I probably learned that the hard way, maybe by self-disclosing a little too much, because I'm a pretty transparent person and I like to bounce ideas off of people. But I eventually remembered that everybody has an agenda. So in a small group, everybody is always concerned about what's in it for them, even though we have a team attitude and we all work together as a team. That can carry you so far, but eventually there's certain things that you can't talk to your staff about. So and it is a little bit lonely when you're trying to run a group like this. And I have a little video that's going to reinforce that. So hopefully this will play.
Hey, so Captain, what about you? I mean, you don't brag at all?
I don't brag to you, Rodman. I'm a captain. Chain of command. Right to go up, not down. Always up. You brag to me. I brag to my superior officer, so on, so on, so on. I don't brag to you. I don't brag in front of you.
So of course this is from Saving Private Ryan. And I don't mean to say that we're a military organization and we don't have as much on the line as these guys did or people in the military do. But the idea of organizational structure is you can't complain down the chain of command. And eventually when you're at the top, you know, who do you vet ideas off of, brainstorm with? And so what's working for me is to be in a peer group, people who are other CEOs, people who have no vested interest in what's going on with your organization, people who have similar experiences. And being a member of a peer group for the last 3 years has really exposed me to a different way of thinking, new books and references, entrepreneurial operating systems like Traction, and I now know what EBITDA is. So I think that's my last. Oh yeah, recession. And I already touched on it in several ways. Some of the ways we're prepared for a recession is I don't borrow money. I keep a lot of cash on hand. I have a variable compensation scheme that would allow the employees to ride up and down depending upon their own efforts and how the market goes. And yeah, thank you. That's why he's here. So we've also diversified our practices so we're not locked in. You know, this is kind of an interesting thing. Talk about technology. Traffic accident reconstruction may be a thing of the past if automated vehicles are able to make the roads that much safer. Now, the predictions that we're reading is that's 15 to 20 years out, and I'll be hiking or on a boat somewhere by then. Yeah, exactly. One of those $200,000 boats. But what I'm concerned about is the welfare of the next generation. But the average life of a vehicle in the U.S. is, how many, 12 years? So cars that are being bought now will still be being driven in 2030. So this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. It is going to happen, but it's going to be a 20 or 30-year process, in my opinion, based on what I've heard and read. 10 years is going to be a lot of changes, but people aren't going to throw away $40,000 cars just because you can upgrade to a smarter car. People just, you can't afford it. And the other thing too that's helping us in the state of Florida is, I just listened to the news on the way in, stuck on I-4. you're talking about population decreases in states like New York and New Jersey and Illinois. And guess what they said 20 times on the news show? They're all moving to Florida. And you can see it with all the construction going on. And as part of this construction boom, there are going to be accidents and failures. And there'll be conflicts and the need for conflict resolution. So we're poised in exactly the right geographical market in terms of the state, exactly the right geographical market in being in the middle of the state, because we can get to any part of the state within 4 hours. So, and then we have a new office in West Palm, so we're ready to burst into that area of the state and grow there as well. Any other recession advice, Mitch? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know if it's an ask you question, but
I'm done.
you mentioned your variable comp plan, which was sort of consistent with some of the things that Bill had said. So I was curious, in the engineering industry, A, is variable comp plan common? And then what is your employee's perspective on that variable compensation plan? How do
Okay.
you sell it, I guess?
So typically, when you're an engineer working for a company, you have a pretty decent base salary, and your bonus is completely unpredictable and at the whim of your supervisor, based on very subjective evaluations. And so it becomes an argument between you and your boss, and between them and their boss, to fight over this pool of money, which has been designated by some committee somewhere as your bonus pool, okay? So you have no control over your bonus other than fighting over a relatively small number. In ours, it's directly traceable to performance. And that has great appeal to those engineers and scientists who have an entrepreneurial bent, which is the kind of people I prefer to hire. I don't prefer to hire somebody who wants to sit at their desk and be spoon-fed work. That mentality isn't going to work in our company. If you're slow, go out and get work. Go internally and talk to your peers. Is there something I can help you with? And it's amazing the attitude we have in our group. It takes about 6 months for somebody to figure it out. But once they figure it out, that's all they talk about, is driving utilization. How can I generate more work through external relationships? How can I generate more work through internal relationships? Is a project in need of additional work? Have we done all the work that needs to be done on a project to make sure that we're ready to meet the client's expectations? And that kind of churn creates more revenue and creates more utilization for the employee, which enhances their bonus and our bottom line. The more people bill, the more money we make in terms of profit too. So the higher the billing rate, the more profit, and the more they bill, the more profit. It seems counterintuitive, but the math works out that way.
Can I ask a question from the engagement standpoint? Right, hearing you share that it's hard to get engineers to begin to sell and then develop the relationships with their clients. What was that transition like? And did you interview the clients, or what was your way of getting feedback to make sure that transfer was okay to the point where they could not know your name anymore?
So there's not one answer to that question. So I'll answer it this way. I put people in front of clients in the beginning when I was there.
Okay.
Let's go to meetings together. Let's go to inspections together. Let's get on the phone together. And in the beginning, I might talk more because I preferred for them to hear how I do things. And as time went by and we had these repetitive meetings, I talked less and less and less. The other thing too is, I didn't say it here, but I try to spend a lot of time with each employee, particularly new ones. And the way I like to do that is, let's go on a road trip. Let's go to Tampa, Sarasota, Fort Myers, and Miami, and we're going to spend 3 days together in a car. You want to get to know somebody? Spend 3 days with them in a car or a truck. And then get out there in the hot sun and do your work, and then crawl around a wrecked truck, and then go do a client meeting, and then go out to dinner and have a beer in the evening. And then through that process, they can get to know me. They become comfortable with me. They learn to trust me, and I get to know a little bit about them. And 2 or 3 trips like that, and that trust is there. And then as part of that is, how do you talk to clients? What are the issues with clients? What are clients looking for? And in 2 or 3 days, you can do a lot of training. And that's worked out really well for me. And then eventually, in terms of client feedback is have a relationship that's strong enough with your client that they can call you privately and give you some critiques of that employee. And I always thank them. Thank you so much for trying out this new person. Because I really, not everybody will do it, but those that do, I really appreciate because they're helping me to build a successful and strong company. And they're helping themselves because nobody's around forever. And eventually I'm going to start working less and less and saying no more and more. Like my wife says, no is a sentence, no period. I'm not going to do this. You're going to have to use somebody else. So that's a good question.
I just love the formula and the model. It's one-on-one, you're scaling it, you're spending your time where it counts, and that's in the new people coming on. As new people that are coming on, I mean, the toughest thing, and we talk about this in a professional services company, is how do you get people out from behind their desk? Right?
Yeah.
And bringing them out on the road is masterful. I just think it's perfect. But at some point, people will fall into a role, and that role might be more technical and behind the scenes, because we have it in our firm,
Right.
than forward-facing or client-facing. Ideally, we would love everyone to be client-facing, and be able to do that. But it's just hard because you can't necessarily find those talents, right? I mean, how do you take people and transform them? I think your compensation model does a great thing in doing that. To tell you the truth, the difference maker for me, just hearing this, is the time with you early on. And now that's modeling that behavior.
Yeah.
But how do you counteract the temptation to fall back into what they were used to? Because in some cases you've got folks who are 50, 60 years old.
Yes. Yeah, we do have a wide range of ages in our company from, I guess, 26 to 70. But if a person is not externally or facing external clients, then they're facing internal clients, people that they report to within the firm. And so we don't have a vertical chain of command where there's a certain team and these people only report within that team. We build project teams. So when there's a project, we'll assign 3 people to that project: a senior person, a task manager, we call them, and then a graphics manager or technical person. And so we construct 3 people teams on each job, and we intentionally mix those teams up on every job. So there's groups of people who tend to work together more, but if somebody is light, then they would tell our production coordinator that, or they'd walk down the hall and say, I'm a little light today, do you have anything to do? And once you get on a project, then the person could work on it 10 or 20 hours on one job. So the idea would be to encourage those people who aren't very comfortable speaking with clients, or maybe who would rather not speak to clients because they're not ready yet, to hone their skill by talking to their internal partners and clients.
You have a recession as an opportunity for those who are prepared, right? You really are selling the intelligence of people as your core product and service deliverable. Do you feel that you're prepared for a recession, or do you feel that your company is suspect or has opportunity to lower its capabilities during a recession time?
Yes and yes. So I'll explain. We have an advantage in that our business actually has the opportunity to grow during a recession, just because of the financial condition a lot of people find themselves in. So you see a lot of claims that are fabricated, and our job is to go ferret out the false ones. But more importantly, we're diversifying. I'm more concerned about technology changes, maybe driving out the accident recon work. So we're getting into building systems, premises claims, product liability and product failure analysis, electrical engineering. So we are diversifying our discipline service offerings and continuing to build relationships with a vast array of clients through geographic expansion as well. We're engaged in a digital marketing effort right now. SEO, a term I'd never heard of 2 years ago. We're doing that. But really we're studying very diligently who our competitors are, who their clients are, who our clients are, who they're hiring, what are the transitions. So we're really focusing on what's going on among our client base and competitors a lot more than we ever did before, and I dare say a lot more than our competitors are doing. So we're preparing to be aggressive, and once we become more aggressive, we should increase our opportunities and minimize the downside risk.
How many of those $60,000 pens did you have to invest in?
So we bought one and we loved it so much and the guys were fighting over it. We bought another and the same thing happened. So now we have 5. So we have 5 Faro 3D scanners. I think we're their biggest client in Florida. We were the first adopter of that technology in Florida. And what happened there was our competitors, people more my age group, said, damn it, Don, every time you come to an inspection with a scanner, I get needled by my client. Where's your scanner? So I told Faro they should be giving me a kickback because our competitors have all bought scanners now. The other big technology change is drones. So now we don't have to hire airplanes to go fly a crash site. We just launch a drone and get all the data we need, and the images are amazing. And so this is an educational thing too, where our clients didn't know the value of a 3D laser scanner. We had to teach them about what a scanner was. So now when they call, they say, Don, take that scanner thingy that you have and make sure you guys are using it. They don't really even understand fully what it does, but they love the output. And it's a technology separator when they're competing with their competitors, adverse attorneys and so forth. Drones are the same way. So we do aerial video and aerial photographs of all crash locations, vehicles, houses, whatever it is we're shooting in. The quality of 4K is amazing. And an attorney might say, God, I don't want to spend $1,000 to have you send a drone. I said, we'll do it for free. You'll look at the product and you tell me if you want it. Every time. Now they say, take that scanner thing and that droney thing out there and go do both. So we have to educate our clients about technology and how that's changing. And don't forget too, black boxes in vehicles. Almost all passenger cars have recording systems. Almost all commercial trucks have recording systems. And many of them, infotainment systems, your dash navigation system. So there's ways to get data out of all of those that can help us reconstruct a crash. All of that equipment costs money. All of the ability to get the data out costs money to train people. And then our clients don't even know that data exists, so there's an educational component to teach them about the state of technology in our world.
And on that same message, what expenses concern you the most in a recession? Because I can see the top line opportunity, but what expenses concern you?
I mean, payroll obviously is an issue, but with the variable model, you know, with performance decreasing or income and work decreasing, their pay decreases as well, so we're kind of hedging that risk. I guess fixed costs like rent and things like that, where we're locked into a long-term lease, would be something that we would be more worried about.
You know, it's funny, remember in recession, I got a great deal in rental space. We just released a new space, I did not get a great deal.
Yeah.
So in both spaces, I was going through sticker shock about how much they're charging for leasing space right now on these 2 buildings. And our rent costs are 10 times what they were when we started the company. Of course, we have a lot more people, we need a lot more space. We're renting space for growth, so we have space we're not using yet. Hedging, you know, recognize we're going to hire 10 or 15 more people here in Orlando. So, thank you.
Thank you.